You know as well as I do that the mission was to get the fourth carrier in, to have some real competition, and it's been all the confusion around who's in, who's out, when the auction's going to be, that we now have a major competitor or a major player withdrawing at the last minute, as you said. And this leaves a huge vacuum, and it actually leaves Canadians, many in our rural communities, without adequate internet coverage, and for many of us, very slow coverage. And what it also does is, you know, prices are still very high when you compare them to other places. And I don't know where this competition is going to come from.
Well, hold on. Let me challenge you on the rural.
Yeah.
All companies, whether they're Canadian or not, have certain requirements to meet. Why would you suggest that any new player, whoever comes in, would give better coverage to rural areas when the government's already set the requirements? That wouldn't change.
That wouldn't change, but when you get competition, each of the companies that's present now and the new provider would be forced to up the offerings they have for our rural areas.
But the requirements are, sorry, the requirements are the requirements. Is that, I want people listening, is that a red herring? People in rural areas are going to have to get requirements met one way or the other, right?
They are going to have the requirements met, but if you travel in northern Canada, as I've traveled around northern BC a fair bit, what you will find is there are areas that are still complaining about having adequate coverage or the speed of their internet services. So what I'm saying is when you get more competition, you don't have a few people with a monopoly and controlling things. So I think having a fourth player in the game would actually be better for the consumers.
All right, let me ask you, Mark Garneau, why does Canada need a fourth player? By the way, there's 10 telecom companies that are already active in this space. Why does the fourth big player, why is that needed?
Well, to provide competition, and it's a bad day for consumers, particularly in Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia. And I can remember Tony Clement in 2010 when he was talking about this 700 megahertz spectrum saying, we've got to get this right and we've only got one shot at it. And it was supposed to be, by the way, in the fall of 2012 that the auction would occur. That's over a year ago. It doesn't look like they're doing it very well, and unfortunately, there are going to be losers here from a consumer point of view. I think they botched the whole thing. You know, the reality is that they've spent a lot of money on expensive commercials that taxpayers have paid for, talking about how they're friendly with friends of the consumer and that they're really against the big three, but they haven't done anything significant to help the consumer.
But what could they do? Let's just go through it. Wind dropped out because its foreign backer, VimpelCom, pulled its support. In September, U.S. giant Verizon said, despite the rumors, it's not going to enter the Canadian market. The government blocked the sale of Allstream to
let me talk about that.
Hang on, over national security concerns. So they've opened it. Nobody's entering. What needs to happen? Do foreign investment rules need to change?
VimpelCom got a very clear message from the government that they were not friendly towards their takeover of Wind Mobile, and they backed out. This is because the government, with respect to foreign investment, has created a climate of uncertainty for investors who want to invest in Canada, not just in the telecom sector, in a whole bunch of sectors. If we talk about potash, if we talk about the Nexon deal, if we talk about MTS Allstream, this government, and Mr. Harper said it himself just a while ago, he said, well, we're not really going to, it's not in our interest to clarify the rules with respect to foreign investment, and that's what's happening today. This is just another example.
All right, Mike Lake, I mean, the opposition is saying this is an example of a policy gone awry. How does the government in the midst of this justify $9 million taxpayer dollars spent on ads about increased competition when in the end there is no real new competition?
Well, let's talk about what Mr. Garneau just had to say. I mean, and Ms. Sims. I mean, the fact of the matter is that no matter what the circumstance was today, I mean, we've done enough of these panels. We know that the opposition parties are going to come on and complain about something. The fact of the matter is that today we're embarking on an auction. This is the start. We're not going to prejudge what's going to happen through this process, but we can look at the facts and the history leading up to this process. The fact is that Canadians are paying almost 20% less for their services today than they were in 2008, largely because of the measures that this government has taken since 2008 on areas like the spectrum auction, in areas like tower sharing and roaming and those kind of things.
But those,
the government
but to
will
be fair,
continue.
but hang on, just a second.
Yeah,
but hang on, Mr. Lake. You're taking credit for the lowering of prices, but the new entrants 5 years ago into the market are now going broke. Okay, so that experiment to make those 5 years later, to make those companies that drove prices down stand on their own 2 feet, didn't work. So and now we have no new entrants. So can I get an answer to the question, in the wake of that, how does the government justify the $9 million ad campaign? Was that money wasted?
First of all, Evan, that's not completely true. Wind Mobile continues to operate in Canada, and as you mentioned, there's 10 applicants in this process moving forward, and we don't know what the outcome of the auction is going to be. So we can't.
But none of them are the size of Wind Mobile.
We can't. Well, they're not right now because none of them have any size
but
hang
now
on, until the auction's
you talk about, and I know there's 10.
And they're able to operate in Canada.
But I just want some perspective, just so folks understand. There are 10 applicants. The 3 big incumbents, Rogers, TELUS, and Bell, own 85% of the spectrum available and 94% of the market share. So you were looking for a big player to come in, not like the small 7, and you didn't get it. So again, was that money on advertising a waste?
Well, Evan, we don't know what we have until the auction's completed. So let's wait until the auction's completed before we judge what the outcome of the auction is. What I would say is that the auction's designed to increase competition, to increase the technology and the quality of the technology that Canadians have access to in this country, to bring down prices and to increase choice. And that's the policy that this government will continue to pursue. It's been effective over the last 5 years, since 2008. We've seen momentum, and we want to continue building on that momentum, and we expect to.
Jinny, so what needs to happen? The auction is going to go off. We don't know, as Mike Lake says, if there will be another player. Thus far, we don't know of any. Now what?
Well, you need a major player to really make it competitive, as you've said, and we don't have one. But I want to also comment on the fact that this government has a penchant for spending money on advertising for things that don't exist, whether it's the job grant that they've spent millions of dollars on, or here promising Canadians something that they can't deliver at the end. And once again, I would say that it's the way that the government has handled this whole auction that has led to so much confusion, people not knowing the rules, and people are going to drop out.
Does the NDP, just so I understand this, would the NDP like to open, are you now suggesting that the NDP supports the notion that opening up foreign ownership increases competition and helps the consumer? So would that mean that that thesis, if it works for telecom, would work for other industries for the NDP?
I think you've got to look at each area on its own and can't make a blanket policy. But here in this case, in order to bring in a 4th player, you need somebody who can compete with the major 3 who are here. But we don't have one.
All right, Mark Arno.
Well, let me say about Wind Mobile, they worked very hard. They're the only one of the smaller players that came in a couple of years ago that is still on their feet. They have about 650,000 subscribers to their services. They, like all the small ones, need access to capital. This would have allowed them to bid on the 700 megahertz spectrum, which is essential to the next generation called LTE that they all want to get at. So this is a company that has the potential of being a competitor. And by the way, they're part of the reason that the 20% decrease in the cost has occurred in the areas where they operate, because they have provided competition. Unfortunately, now they're going to be shut out of the 700 megahertz unless somebody comes forward with a lot of money to help them, to give them the capital that they need to bid on this spectrum.
Evan, it's interesting to hear Mark Garneau speak, because he's saying something completely different than what Wind Mobile had to say yesterday. He's not consistent. And Jinny, I mean, I'm looking forward to the next panel that we have to hear what the NDP policy is on telecom then, because every single time we do a panel on telecom, the policy is different from the NDP.
Okay, can I have
what
less than a minute?
What Canadians can count on from this government is that we will continue to pursue better competition in Canada, more choice for Canadians, better technology for Canadians, and we will be consistent in that every single time
I got less than a minute here. Just so Canadians appreciate, the 700 megahertz spectrum is known as beachfront property. It's very valuable for rural areas because it's a stronger signal for people in buildings. It can penetrate concrete. That's why it's so valuable, as Mark Garneau says, for the next generation. Mr. Lake, if there's not another player, a big player that enters in to compete for that spectrum, obviously that means the government may not raise as much money. What is the calculation, you know, without the competition to bid on the auction? How much does the government stand to lose if there's not another bidder to drive up the price?
Well, Evan, the process here and the way the auction's set up, it's actually not designed to maximize revenue for the government. That's not what this is about. This is about a valuable. This is about a value. This is about a valuable public resource, and we want to make sure that resource is being implemented, is being distributed in a way that benefits Canadians with the absolute best in technology, the best
Mr. Lake,
in choice.
are you sure about that? You're saying that you're going to give. The government's not trying to maximize the value of the megahertz spectrum when private companies like Bell...
I never said that.
Well, why not try to get as high price as possible?
Because it's not about maximizing revenue in this case. It's about
allocating...
It's about allocating the resource, this valuable public resource, in a way that best benefits Canadians in terms of better choice, more competition, better technology and services that they have access to.
Well, you're cutting services to those with disabilities.
I'm surprised. Sorry, I'm surprised. You got private industry bidding on a public resource like the 700 megahertz spectrum. It's very valuable, and you're saying the government's not trying to get as much for the public as possible before we allocate it to industries that are making billions of dollars in profit?
Evan, the point is to ensure that this valuable public resource is allocated in a way that best benefits Canadians in terms of technology, in terms of their ability to use that technology to make their lives better.
Well, you flabbergasted me.
Okay, I got last one. Okay, so Jinny Sims, you're flabbergasted. Mark